In the depths of Northern California, where the fog rolls in like a chilling blanket, a series of brutal and seemingly unrelated murders took place in the late 1960s. The killer, who would come to be known as the Zodiac Killer, left a trail of terror and confusion in his wake. His methods were calculating and ruthless, always one step ahead of the law. The first known victim was David Faraday, 17, and his girlfriend, Betty Lou Jensen, 16, who were found shot to death in their car on a deserted road in Vallejo. This was just the beginning of a twisted game of cat and mouse that would span decades and leave a lasting impact on the world of true crime. The Zodiac Killer's ability to evade capture and his penchant for sending cryptic letters and codes to the police and newspapers only added to the mystery and fear that surrounded him. As we delve into the dark and twisted world of the Zodiac Killer, we will explore the events that led up to his reign of terror and the investigations that followed, in an attempt to unravel the tangled threads of this infamous case. The Zodiac Killer's early victims were mostly young couples who were parked in isolated areas, enjoying some private time together. The killer would often approach them, sometimes posing as a police officer, and then open fire without warning. The brutality and randomness of these attacks sent shockwaves through the community, leaving everyone on high alert and wondering who would be next. As the body count rose, so did the public's fascination with the case. The Zodiac Killer's ability to strike fear into the hearts of his victims and the general public was unmatched, and his legend grew with each new attack. The police were under immense pressure to catch the killer, but every lead seemed to end in a dead end. The investigation was hindered by a lack of evidence and the killer's cunning ability to cover his tracks. Despite the challenges, the police remained determined to bring the Zodiac Killer to justice, and their tireless efforts would eventually lead to some promising breakthroughs. One of the most significant events in the Zodiac Killer case was the attack on Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell at Lake Berryessa. The killer approached the couple, who were picnicking on the beach, and tied them up before stabbing them multiple times. Hartnell survived the attack, but Shepard succumbed to her injuries 2 days later. The Zodiac Killer's methods were becoming increasingly brutal, and his actions were starting to attract more attention from the media and the public. The police were working around the clock to gather evidence and follow up on leads, but the killer always seemed to be one step ahead. The investigation was starting to take a toll on the detectives, who were working long hours and dealing with the emotional strain of the case. Despite the challenges, they remained committed to solving the case and bringing the Zodiac Killer to justice. As the case continued to unfold, it would become clear that the Zodiac Killer was not just a mindless killer, but a calculated and intelligent individual with a twisted sense of purpose. The police investigation into the Zodiac Killer case was one of the most extensive and complex in American history. The detectives were faced with a daunting task, as they had to sift through countless tips and leads, many of which were false or misleading. The killer's ability to send cryptic letters and codes to the police and newspapers added an extra layer of complexity to the case. The codes, which were often written in a cryptic and symbolic language, seemed to be a way for the killer to taunt the police and assert his intellectual superiority. Despite the challenges, the detectives were determined to crack the codes and uncover the killer's identity. They worked tirelessly, using every available resource, from cryptographers to psychologists, to try and understand the killer's motivations and behavior. As the investigation continued, the police began to develop a profile of the killer, which would eventually lead to some promising breakthroughs. The Zodiac Killer's codes were a fascinating and frustrating aspect of the case. The killer would often send letters and cryptograms to the police and newspapers, which seemed to be a way of communicating with the public and the authorities. The codes were often written in a complex and symbolic language, using a combination of letters, numbers, and symbols. The police and amateur codebreakers worked tirelessly to crack the codes, but they proved to be incredibly difficult to decipher. The killer's use of codes added an extra layer of mystery to the case, and it seemed to be a way of asserting his intellectual superiority over the police and the public. Despite the challenges, the codes remain one of the most fascinating aspects of the Zodiac Killer case, and they continue to be studied and analyzed by cryptographers and true crime enthusiasts to this day. The autopsy reports of the Zodiac Killer's victims provide a chilling insight into the brutality and calculation of the killer's methods. The reports detailed the extent of the victims' injuries, which were often severe and fatal. The killer's use of firearms and knives to inflict wounds on his victims was a hallmark of his attacks, and the autopsy reports reveal the full extent of the damage. The reports also provide valuable information about the killer's modus operandi, which would be used to inform the police investigation and develop a profile of the killer. The autopsy reports are a grim reminder of the devastating impact of the Zodiac Killer's actions, and they serve as a poignant tribute to the victims and their families. As the investigation continued, the police would use the autopsy reports to piece together the events surrounding the killings and to develop a timeline of the killer's activities. The police investigation into the Zodiac Killer case was not without its challenges and controversies. The detectives were under immense pressure to solve the case, and they were often forced to work long hours in difficult conditions. The investigation was also hindered by a lack of resources and a shortage of experienced personnel. Despite these challenges, the detectives remained committed to solving the case, and they worked tirelessly to gather evidence and follow up on leads. The investigation was also marked by a series of missteps and mistakes, which would later be criticized by the media and the public. The police handling of the case was often criticized, and the investigation was subject to intense scrutiny. As the case continued to unfold, it would become clear that the Zodiac Killer was not just a serial killer, but a master manipulator who was able to exploit the weaknesses of the police and the media. One of the most bizarre theories to emerge from the Zodiac Killer case was the idea that the killer was a former cop or a member of the military. This theory was based on the killer's apparent knowledge of police procedures and his ability to use military-style codes and ciphers. The theory was also fueled by the killer's use of a distinctive symbol, which resembled a crosshair, in his letters and cryptograms. The symbol was seen as a possible reference to the killer's military or police background, and it added to the speculation and rumor that surrounded the case. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the theory remains one of the most enduring and fascinating aspects of the Zodiac Killer case, and it continues to be debated by true crime enthusiasts and investigators to this day. The Zodiac Killer's use of codes and ciphers was not limited to his letters and cryptograms. The killer also used a variety of symbols and codes in his attacks, which seemed to be a way of signing his work and leaving a calling card. The symbols, which included the crosshair symbol and a variety of other markings, were often found at the crime scenes or on the victims' bodies. The symbols added an extra layer of mystery to the case, and they seemed to be a way of the killer asserting his control and dominance over the victims and the police. The symbols also provided a valuable clue for the police, who were able to use them to develop a profile of the killer and to track his movements. As the investigation continued, the police would use the symbols to piece together the events surrounding the killings and to develop a timeline of the killer's activities. The Zodiac Killer's secret identity remains one of the greatest mysteries of the case. Despite numerous investigations and tips, the killer's true identity was never confirmed, and the case remains unsolved to this day. The killer's ability to evade capture and to maintain his anonymity was a hallmark of his crimes, and it added to the speculation and rumor that surrounded the case. The killer's use of codes and ciphers, as well as his apparent knowledge of police procedures, seemed to be a way of asserting his intellectual superiority over the police and the public. The killer's secret identity also raised questions about his motivations and backstory, and it added to the fascination and intrigue that surrounds the case. As the investigation continued, the police would use a variety of techniques, including profiling and psychological analysis, to try and uncover the killer's true identity. The Zodiac Killer's codes and ciphers remain one of the most fascinating and enduring aspects of the case. The killer's use of complex and symbolic language, which seemed to be a way of communicating with the public and the authorities, added an extra layer of mystery to the case. The codes and ciphers also provided a valuable clue for the police, who were able to use them to develop a profile of the killer and to track his movements. Despite the challenges, the codes and ciphers remain a source of fascination for true crime enthusiasts and cryptographers, who continue to study and analyze them to this day. The codes and ciphers also serve as a testament to the killer's intelligence and cunning, and they add to the legend and mythology that surrounds the case. As the investigation continued, the police would use the codes and ciphers to piece together the events surrounding the killings and to develop a timeline of the killer's activities. In recent years, the Zodiac Killer case has experienced a resurgence of interest, thanks in part to advances in technology and the development of new investigative techniques. The case has been re-examined using modern forensic methods, including DNA analysis and digital enhancement of evidence. The results have been fascinating, and they have provided new insights into the case. The use of DNA analysis, in particular, has been instrumental in identifying potential suspects and in developing a more detailed profile of the killer. The DNA evidence has also raised new questions about the killer's identity and motivations, and it has added to the speculation and intrigue that surrounds the case. As the investigation continues, it is likely that new breakthroughs and discoveries will be made, and the case will continue to fascinate and intrigue the public. One of the most chilling and unexplainable facts about the Zodiac Killer case is the killer's apparent ability to disappear into thin air. Despite the extensive investigation and the numerous tips and leads, the killer was never caught or identified. The killer's ability to evade capture and to maintain his anonymity was a hallmark of his crimes, and it added to the speculation and rumor that surrounded the case. The killer's disappearance also raised questions about his motivations and backstory, and it added to the fascination and intrigue that surrounds the case. The case remains one of the most baffling and intriguing in American true crime history, and it continues to be the subject of intense speculation and debate. As the investigation continues, it is likely that new breakthroughs and discoveries will be made, and the case will continue to fascinate and intrigue the public. The Zodiac Killer's legacy is a complex and multifaceted one, and it continues to be felt to this day. The killer's crimes had a profound impact on the victims and their families, and they also had a significant impact on the wider community. The case raised important questions about the nature of evil and the darkness that exists within human beings. The case also highlighted the importance of law enforcement and the need for effective investigation and prosecution of crimes. The Zodiac Killer's legacy also extends to the world of true crime, where the case remains one of the most famous and intriguing in American history. The case continues to be the subject of intense speculation and debate, and it remains a source of fascination for true crime enthusiasts and investigators. As the investigation continues, it is likely that new breakthroughs and discoveries will be made, and the case will continue to fascinate and intrigue the public. The Zodiac Killer case is a reminder that, even in the most seemingly inexplicable and bizarre cases, there is often a deeper truth and a more complex reality. The case is a testament to the power of human curiosity and the importance of seeking truth and justice. The case also highlights the importance of perseverance and determination in the face of adversity, and it serves as a reminder that even the most difficult and challenging cases can be solved with dedication and hard work. As the investigation continues, it is likely that new breakthroughs and discoveries will be made, and the case will continue to fascinate and intrigue the public. The Zodiac Killer case is a true crime mystery that will continue to captivate and intrigue audiences for generations to come, and it remains one of the most infamous and enduring cases in American history. As we conclude our journey into the dark and twisted world of the Zodiac Killer, we are left with more questions than answers. The case remains unsolved, and the killer's true identity remains a mystery. The investigation continues, and new breakthroughs and discoveries are being made. But as we reflect on the case, we are reminded of the devastating impact that the Zodiac Killer had on the victims and their families. And we are left to ponder the deeper questions about the nature of evil and the darkness that exists within human beings. The Zodiac Killer case is a true crime mystery that will continue to haunt and fascinate us, and it remains one of the most infamous and enduring cases in American history. And as we fade to black, we are left with a haunting question: will the Zodiac Killer ever be caught, or will he remain a ghostly figure, forever lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike again? The answer, much like the killer's true identity, remains a mystery, leaving us with a haunting sense of uncertainty and a lasting sense of unease.